The small figure crouched near the waste bins, her thin arms shaking as she reached for a half-rotten piece of bread covered in dust. The market around her was alive with voices, sellers shouting, buyers arguing over prices, footsteps echoing against metal floors. No one cared about her. Some turned their heads away, others curled their lips in disgust. To them, she was nothing more than a pest, a stray creature that should have been swept away long ago. Her skin, once bright with natural markings, was pale now, dirty, and her alien eyes glowed faintly even in the daylight, a reminder of who she once was. She pressed the bread to her mouth, chewing quickly, afraid that someone might snatch it from her hands. 2 aliens walked by and kicked the trash toward her. She flinched, curling up tight, like a beaten dog. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. "Look at her," one said. "She eats like an animal." The other shook his head. Not even worth the trouble. Should have been thrown out of the city cycles ago. Their voices faded into the noise of the crowd, but their words stayed heavy in the air. She reached for another scrap, this one a piece of dried fruit, her small fingers trembling. She had learned to move fast. Take, bite, swallow. If she waited, the food would be gone. Her stomach growled loudly, making her cheeks burn. She pulled the fruit to her lips, but before she could bite, a shadow fell over her. She froze. Boots stopped beside her. Not the heavy steps of guards, not the cold hiss of alien merchants. These boots were different, polished but dusty from travel. She dared to glance upward, and her glowing eyes met the face of a human man. He was tall, his shoulders broad, a travel pack slung across his back. His clothes were plain, worn from long use, yet clean compared to the filth around her. His gaze wasn't mocking, nor cruel. It was sharp, steady, and filled with something she had forgotten existed: concern. For a moment she panicked, ready to scurry into the shadows. But the man didn't raise his hand. He didn't push her away. Slowly, he knelt in front of her, placing something on the ground between them. It was bread. Fresh bread, warm, the smell soft and alive. She stared at it, her throat tight. Her mind screamed trap. Nothing came without pain. If she touched it, he would slap her. If she ate, he would laugh like the others. Her fingers clenched into her chest, her nails scratching the dirty fabric she wore. The man didn't move the bread closer, didn't force it into her hand. He just left it there and looked at her as if waiting. Around them, a few aliens noticed and chuckled. A human feeding a gutter rat, one sneered. What a waste of food. Others joined in, pointing, mocking. Still the man ignored them. His eyes never left hers. Her stomach ached. The scent of the bread was too much. Slowly, with her body trembling, she reached out. Her fingertips brushed the crust. The man still didn't stop her. She snatched it quickly, pressed it to her lips, and took a bite so fast it hurt her teeth. The taste was overwhelming. Real food. She stuffed another bite into her mouth, chewing wildly, afraid it would vanish. A soft sound broke through her panic. A voice. His voice. Calm, deep, carrying no anger. She couldn't understand all the words, but the tone was strange. Not harsh, not cruel, gentle. She paused, her cheeks full of bread, and stared at him. He spoke again, slower this time. One word she knew: eat. Her eyes watered as she swallowed, choking slightly, then nodded. She whispered, voice broken and almost lost in the market noise, "Thank." The man's face softened, just a little. He gave the smallest nod, as if her words mattered. She didn't remember the last time anyone had listened when she spoke. Her chest tightened, a strange warmth building where before there had only been hunger and fear. But the crowd around them didn't share that warmth. Whispers turned to jeers. Humans are fools. She's just a thief. Why waste kindness on something that isn't even worth breathing? Laughter rose again, cruel and sharp. One alien merchant tossed a rotten fruit at her. She ducked quickly, but the human's hand moved faster, catching it before it struck her. Silence spread for a heartbeat. He held the fruit, then dropped it to the ground with disgust, his eyes sweeping across the jeering faces. They looked away, muttering. He turned back to her, his expression calm again, as if the crowd didn't matter. Her hands clutched the bread close to her chest. She ate slower now, the panic fading, though her eyes stayed fixed on him. She didn't understand. People didn't look at her this way. They looked at her like dirt, like an insect, something to step on. But he looked at her as if she were someone real. Her lips trembled as she whispered again, this time more certain. "Thank you." The man gave no speech, made no gesture of pride. He simply stood, adjusting his pack, but his hand brushed her shoulder gently, almost careful, before he turned to walk away. The touch lingered like fire in her chest. She clutched the bread tightly, staring after him until he disappeared into the crowd. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a dog crawling for scraps. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was something more. The next day, the market was just as loud. The same voices fighting over prices, the same smells of spice and dust filling the air. The little alien girl was back in her usual place near the edge of the trash piles, but something inside her felt different. The taste of that warm bread from yesterday had not left her mouth, nor had the memory of the human's steady eyes. She kept looking around, half hoping and half afraid that he might appear again. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She reached for a broken shell of fruit, but her mind remembered the soft bread. The difference was too much. Her throat ached as she chewed the sour scrap. Still, she forced herself to swallow. That was life. That was survival. Yet deep in her heart, the thought whispered, maybe he will come back. The crowd shifted. Boots echoed again. Her head jerked up. The human was there, walking slowly through the marketplace. His pack hung heavy on his back, and his steps were quiet, steady, unlike the arrogant stomps of the merchants. He carried something in his hand, wrapped in cloth. She froze, not daring to move. What if it was not for her? What if yesterday was only a dream? But then his eyes found her through the sea of faces, and once again, he walked toward her. The crowd noticed, some sneering, others already laughing, remembering yesterday's scene. The girl's body curled up in fear, but she could not look away. He stopped in front of her, knelt down, and placed the wrapped food between them. Slowly, he unwrapped it, and the smell of cooked meat and soft bread drifted out. Her heart thudded. Real food again. She wanted to reach for it, but her hand shook too much. Around them, voices rose in mockery. The human feeds the rat again. Maybe he thinks he'll tame it. Disgusting. Laughter broke out. Someone tossed a coin on the ground as if mocking her, but the human ignored it. His calm face did not change. He simply pushed the food a little closer to her and waited. The girl's lips trembled. This was a trap. It had to be. No one gave food freely. But his eyes, the same as yesterday, told her something else. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't waiting for her to humiliate herself. He was just waiting. Her tiny fingers stretched out, touched the bread, and then pulled back quickly. The human nodded slowly, encouraging, not demanding. Finally, she grabbed the bread, pulled it to her chest, and bit into it with sharp hunger. The taste was too much, too good, and tears filled her glowing eyes as she chewed. See? Look at her. One alien laughed loudly. She is no better than a dog, begging on the ground. The crowd howled, but suddenly the human spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but the firmness in his tone cut through the noise. Enough. The laughter stumbled into silence. He didn't raise his voice again, didn't fight, didn't curse. He just stared at them until their smirks faltered. Slowly, one by one, they turned away, muttering insults under their breath, but none dared to stay close. The girl froze mid-bite, staring at him. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever stopped the laughter. She swallowed hard, still clutching the food, afraid the moment would end. When her mouth was no longer full, she whispered in a broken voice, "Thank you." Her words were soft, almost lost, but the human leaned a little closer as if they were important. His face softened again. She did something she had not done in years. She smiled, a tiny, fragile thing, uncertain and shy. The bread in her hands was real. His presence was real. Maybe kindness was real too. But kindness came with danger. A pair of guards, tall and armored, had seen everything. They marched forward, their heavy boots making the ground shake. "That creature has debts," one barked, pointing at the girl. "She has no right to eat freely. Move aside, human." The girl shrank back, her food clutched tightly, her whole body trembling. She knew what came next. The guards would drag her away, beat her, or worse. She had lived it many times. She almost dropped the bread just to prove she wasn't stealing, but her hands wouldn't let go. Her eyes darted up to the human, expecting him to leave. Everyone left when the guards came. But he did not move. He stood, tall and silent, between her and the armored aliens. The crowd gasped. "Fool," someone whispered. "He'll be killed." The guard snarled. "This is none of your concern, human. Hand her over." The man didn't lift his weapon. He had none. But his stance was solid, unshakable. Slowly, he pulled a handful of credits from his pocket and threw them at the guard's feet. The coins clattered on the ground. "Paid," he said firmly. "Now leave her alone." The guards blinked, anger flashing in their alien eyes. But money was money, and law was law. They growled, gathered the credits, and spat on the ground. "Not worth the trouble," one muttered before turning away. The other followed, leaving the girl untouched. The market fell into silence again. All eyes were on the human who had just paid for an alien no one cared about. The girl looked up at him, unable to breathe. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, and for the first time, she felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. She whispered again, voice breaking but stronger than before. "Thank you, kind man?" The human didn't speak. He only placed his hand lightly on her small shoulder, steady and warm, before walking past her into the crowd. She turned to watch him leave, bread clutched tightly, her heart beating fast. This time, she didn't feel like trash. She didn't feel like a thief. For one shining moment, she felt like someone worth saving. The whispers began to spread faster than the girl could eat the last crumbs of bread. Every corner of the marketplace seemed to hum with the same words. The human feeds her. The thief has protection. He even paid her debts. Eyes that had once ignored her now followed wherever she went, not with pity, but with sharp curiosity. She felt the weight of their stares pressing on her fragile body. She tried to make herself small, curling close to the wall of a stall, clutching the last piece of bread against her chest, but nothing could hide her glowing eyes. They always betrayed her, twin lanterns shining even when she wanted to disappear. The human man walked beside her slowly, not touching, not forcing, but his presence was enough to keep the jeering crowd at a distance. Yet it also pulled attention like a fire in the dark. The market had seen many humans come and go. Traders, wanderers, mercenaries, but none of them had ever stopped for her. None of them had stood against guards. None of them had paid with their own credits. The merchants gathered in groups, whispering with anger. She had been their little amusement, a reminder of what happens when a royal line falls, a child to beg like a dog. Now she was no longer invisible, and that made her dangerous. She sensed the change in the air. She was not used to kindness bringing danger, but her bones felt it, the way prey knows when hunters circle. Her hands trembled as she licked the last crumbs from her fingers, wishing she could vanish. The human stopped suddenly at a stall, pretending to look at weapons laid out on the table. His eyes, though, flicked to the side, watching the group of guards that had reappeared at the edge of the street. He said nothing, but the girl saw the small tension in his jaw. He knew. The guards began to move forward. People stepped aside quickly, clearing a path, eager to see what would happen. Their heavy boots hit the ground like drums, and their long metal staffs clinked together with every step. The girl's heart pounded so loud she thought everyone could hear it. She knew what came next. She had been dragged before. She had been beaten before, but never had anyone stood in front of her when it happened. One of the guards pointed straight at her. "There she is," he growled. "The little thief. Her debts are not gone. You cannot erase her punishment with credits." The crowd murmured, half afraid, half entertained. The merchants leaned closer, their sharp eyes glittering. This was their show. The human straightened, turning to face them fully. He did not draw a weapon. He had none, but his stance was like a wall. Calm, unmoving. His voice came steady and low. "She owes you nothing now. She is free." The guard laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping stone. "Free? That word does not belong to her. She is property. She eats from the ground like a beast. She belongs to us until the end of her days." The little girl felt herself shaking harder. The word property dug deep into her chest. She had heard it before. It was the word that stripped her name, her past, her blood. She curled tighter, her glowing eyes dimming with shame. But the human did not step aside. He took a single step forward instead, and the crowd gasped. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and clearly not armed. Still, he did not move away. His shadow fell across her, shielding her small form. His voice grew louder now, carrying through the market. "She is not property. She is not a beast. She is under my protection." The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. No one had ever spoken like that for her. Not once. The crowd shifted nervously, but the merchants narrowed their eyes and whispers turned darker. One of the older merchants stepped forward, his robes sweeping the ground, his long alien fingers twitching with greed. His voice was smooth but heavy with venom. "Human," he said, "you are making a mistake. That girl is nothing. She is cursed blood. She is worth less than the dirt on your boots. Yet if you care so much, if you want her so badly, then keep paying. Because if she stays with you, every step you take in this city will cost you." The crowd laughed again, though less boldly. The guard smirked, waiting to see if he would falter. The human tilted his head slightly, his eyes sharp as steel. He did not shout back, nor argue. Instead, he reached into his pack, pulled out a few more credits, and dropped them at the merchant's feet. "Paid," he said firmly. Then he leaned forward just slightly, his voice calm but dangerous. "Touch her again, and you'll learn what human debts look like." The merchant stiffened, his lips curling back, but he did not answer. The guards hesitated, exchanging looks. Slowly, they turned and stepped back, their heavy boots retreating with anger that could not hide their caution. The girl stared up at the human, unable to believe what she had just seen. He was not rich, that much she could tell. The credits he gave away were probably precious to him, and yet he spent them on her, a nobody, a scrap-eater. Her throat closed up, her breath catching. She whispered softly, words trembling out like broken glass. "Why? You help me?" He glanced down at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then his eyes softened, just a little, and he said, "Because no one else will." Her tears came then, silent and hot, dripping down her dirty cheeks. She turned her face away quickly, ashamed to cry in front of him. But inside, a strange fire burned, something she had not felt in so long, dignity. Around them, the market buzzed louder, rumors twisting through every mouth. The human protects her. The thief is not alone anymore. Something is happening. The attention grew like a storm cloud, pressing in from all sides. The human placed his hand gently on her shoulder again, guiding her away from the crowd. She followed, stumbling but refusing to let go of the bread still clutched to her chest. The market's laughter and whispers echoed behind them, but for the first time in her memory, she did not walk alone. And though she was afraid, a new fear whispered louder. What would happen now that everyone was watching? The human had left the marketplace after paying off the guards, moving through the streets with steady steps. The girl stayed hidden in the shadows, watching him from a distance. She clutched the last crumbs of bread in her hands, afraid to lose sight of him. He had defended her when no one else dared, and she could not let that kind of protection slip away. So she followed. Her small feet moved quietly, her glowing eyes peeking around corners. Night fell over the city. The bright stalls closed one by one, and the noise of the market turned into the low hum of drunk voices and the rustle of distant machinery. The human walked into the poorer district, where lights were dim and walls were broken. He found a small room above a mechanic's shop and went inside. The girl waited, crouched near the doorway across the street. Her stomach twisted again with hunger, but worse than hunger was the fear of being alone. If he left tomorrow, she would be back to scraps, to kicks and laughter, to the cold hands of guards. She tried to leave, to force herself back into the alleys she knew so well, but her feet would not move. Instead, she crept across the street, her small body pressed low, and climbed the stairs to his room. The door was shut, but the cracks in the wood showed the warm glow of light inside. She pressed her ear against it, listening. She heard the sound of water running, the scrape of boots being set down, and then silence. Her hand shook as she tapped the door once. No answer. She tapped again, softer this time, almost ashamed of the sound. Suddenly, the door opened. She stumbled back, her glowing eyes wide, staring up at the tall man who filled the doorway. He looked down at her without surprise, as if he had known she was there all along. "What are you doing here?" His voice came calm, but not cruel. She froze, words locked in her throat. Her hands twisted in the fabric of her dirty clothes. Finally, she whispered, "Don't leave me." Her voice cracked as if it might break apart completely. For a long moment, he said nothing. The girl thought he would close the door. She braced herself for rejection, ready to run into the night. But instead, he stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. The room was simple. A wooden table, a small bed, a single lamp glowing faintly. The girl stepped in carefully, clutching her arms close, afraid to touch anything. The human closed the door and sat at the edge of the bed, watching her. She stood near the corner, trembling. "You can't stay here," he said after a moment. "It's dangerous for both of us." Her heart sank. She lowered her head, unable to answer. But her body betrayed her, taking a step closer, then another, until she stood only a few feet away from him. "Please," she whispered. "I will be quiet. I will not cause trouble. Just don't send me away." He studied her carefully, his eyes unreadable. She felt the weight of his silence pressing on her chest. Then he sighed and leaned back slightly. "You don't even know me. Why follow a stranger?" Her glowing eyes lifted to meet his. They were wet with unshed tears. "Because you saw me." Her voice shook, but the words were heavy with truth. "No one sees me, only you." The human's expression changed, the hardness in his gaze softening again. He rubbed his forehead as if fighting some inner battle, then looked back at her. "If you stay with me, others will come after us. They already noticed today. You understand?" She nodded quickly, almost desperately. She didn't care. She had lived her whole life running from people who wanted to hurt her. At least this time, she wouldn't be running alone. He shook his head slightly, almost in disbelief, then reached into his pack and pulled out a wrapped meal. He placed it on the table between them. "Eat," he said simply. Her stomach growled loud at the sight and smell, and without hesitation she crawled forward and grabbed the food. She ate with trembling hands, but this time slower, calmer, because she knew it wouldn't be stolen. Her eyes lifted to him often, checking if he would take it back, but he only watched quietly. When she finished, she leaned against the wall, exhaustion heavy in her small body. The warmth of the room, the full stomach, and his steady presence wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't felt in years. Her eyelids drooped, but she forced herself awake, afraid that if she slept, he might leave her behind. The human noticed. He stood, pulled an old blanket from the bed, and draped it around her small shoulders. The fabric smelled faintly of dust and travel, but to her it was softer than silk. She looked up at him, wide-eyed, not understanding why he did this. "Rest," he said, his voice quiet. Her lips parted as if to argue, but then she nodded, pulling the blanket tighter. She curled up on the floor, her glowing eyes dimming slowly as sleep crept in. Before she drifted off, she whispered into the silence, "Thank you." The human stood by the window, watching the streets below, his figure outlined by the pale light from outside. His jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the shadows. He knew the merchants and guards would not forget what had happened in the market. Trouble would come. But as he turned to glance at the small figure, sleeping against the wall, clutching the blanket like treasure, he also knew he couldn't send her away. The city outside pulsed with danger, but inside that small room, for the first time in years, the girl slept without fear. The morning light slipped through the broken shutters, casting pale lines across the dusty floor. The little alien girl stirred beneath the blanket, her glowing eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The warmth, the food in her belly, the quiet. It felt like a dream. Then she saw the human standing near the window, his arms crossed, his gaze scanning the streets below as if waiting for something. Her chest tightened. He was still there. He hadn't left her. She sat up quickly, clutching the blanket as though it would vanish if she let go. The human turned, his face calm, unreadable. "You slept," he said simply. She nodded, lowering her head in a shy gesture. No one had ever cared if she slept. No one had guarded her while she did. She whispered softly, "Thank you." He walked to the table and placed a small piece of dried meat and fruit before her. "Eat," he said. She obeyed instantly, chewing carefully this time. Not like an animal stealing scraps, but like someone afraid to waste even a single bite. Her glowing eyes lifted to him now and then, searching, measuring, as though trying to understand why he gave her these things. When her hunger eased, the silence grew heavy. She pulled the blanket tighter and spoke in a voice that trembled at first. "I was not always this." Her eyes lowered to the floor, ashamed. He said nothing, waiting. The quiet encouraged her to continue, words spilling out in broken pieces. "Once, I had a home. Tall halls, lights brighter than the sun. People bowed when I walked. I had family." Her lips trembled. Then war came. They betrayed us. They said my family was unfit. They killed, burned, tore everything down. I ran and never stopped. Her fingers clutched the edge of the blanket until her knuckles turned pale. They called me cursed blood. They chased me out. To survive, I ate trash. They laughed and spat on me. I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I am nothing. Her voice cracked, the shame too heavy to hold. The human's expression didn't change quickly. He stood still, watching her, his eyes steady and sharp, as if weighing her words. Then slowly, he walked closer and crouched so his eyes met hers. "What are you now?" he asked. She blinked at him, confused. "What? What are you now?" His voice was firm but not harsh. Her lips trembled. I am nothing," she whispered, the words tasting bitter. He shook his head. "No, you are alive. You are more than they say. Don't let their words decide who you are." She stared at him, her glowing eyes wide, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her before. Her chest tightened painfully, as if something long buried was struggling to rise. Her throat ached as she whispered, "But they said I am cursed. They said I am filth." His voice grew stronger, steady as stone. "And what do you believe? Them or yourself?" Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. She didn't know how to believe in herself anymore. She lowered her head, trembling. I don't know." The human sighed softly, then stood. "Then learn. Start now. You're not a dog eating scraps. You're not property. You're not nothing. You're still you, no matter what they tried to take." Her glowing eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't only of shame. Something else stirred inside her, something that felt like a memory of strength. She remembered tall halls, her family's crest shining on the walls, her mother's soft hand on her shoulder. For a moment, she could almost believe she was not broken. She whispered, almost to herself, "I was a princess." The human's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disbelief but in thought. "Then maybe it's time you start carrying yourself like one again." The words hit her like a spark in the dark. She stared at him, stunned. Princess. The title felt foreign now, almost impossible. Yet hearing it from him, spoken without mockery, planted a seed deep in her chest. She hugged the blanket tighter, her tears falling silently. The human turned back to the window, his posture alert. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "The merchants, the guards, they won't stop. Not when they know who you are." Her breath caught. Fear pressed against her ribs, but alongside it came something else. Anger. Anger at being hunted. Anger at being treated like trash. She whispered, "Then why stay with me? You could walk away, safer for you." He didn't turn to her. His voice came low but strong. "Because you deserve a chance, and because I choose to stay." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. No one had ever chosen her before. Everyone had thrown her away. Everyone except him. For a long time, the room was silent, except for the hum of the city outside. The girl sat wrapped in the blanket, her glowing eyes reflecting the dim light, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Slowly, she lifted her head. For the first time in years, she sat straighter, shoulders less hunched, as if testing the weight of dignity again. The human glanced at her, and a faint hint of approval flickered in his eyes. He said nothing, but she felt it like a flame warming her cold heart. Outside, voices rose in the street, the noise of merchants and guards gathering. Trouble was coming again. But inside, something had changed. She was no longer only the scrap eater. She was remembering who she had been. And deep inside, though fear still clung to her, she wondered if the human was right, that she could learn to be more than what the world called her. The streets outside grew louder as the day wore on. The human had taken the girl with him, keeping his steps steady while she walked just behind, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Every corner they turned seemed filled with whispers. Merchants leaned close to one another, guards glanced their way, and strangers smirked when they saw the little alien child walking beside a human. She felt the eyes piercing her like blades. Fear clawed at her stomach. But when she looked at the human's tall figure, calm and unshaken, she forced herself to keep moving. By midday, the tension broke. A group of guards stepped into their path at the edge of a wide plaza. The people nearby fell silent, forming a circle around them, eager for the show. The leader of the guards raised his staff and pointed straight at the girl. His voice thundered through the plaza. "That creature does not belong here. Step aside, human. You have no right to interfere." The girl froze, her glowing eyes wide, her body trembling. She knew this scene. She had lived it many times before. They would drag her away, beat her, sell her, or worse. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter, her throat dry with panic. Her eyes darted to the human, waiting, terrified he would finally abandon her. But he stepped forward instead, his shadow falling across her. His voice carried through the air, calm but firm, each word heavy with steel. She is not a creature. She is not yours. She is free. The crowd gasped. The guards snarled in anger, their hands tightening on their weapons. The leader laughed cruelly. Free? You don't understand, human. She is cursed. She is property. You protect her. You share her curse. Do you want to be hunted with her? The human's eyes narrowed. He reached into his pack, pulled out more credits, and threw them at the guard's feet. The coins scattered across the stone ground. His voice thundered now, sharper than before. Paid. Her debts are gone. She owes nothing. The guards growled, their pride stung by his defiance. The leader's lips curled back. You think money changes blood? Her blood is marked. She will never be free. He raised his staff as though ready to strike. The crowd leaned forward, waiting to see blood spilled. The girl's heart raced, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, to beg him to let her go so he would not suffer because of her. But before she could speak, he turned his head just enough to glance at her. His eyes met hers, steady and certain. The message was clear. He would not leave her. He faced the guards again, his voice cutting the silence. She is not cursed. She is not nothing. She is more than you can see, and I will protect her. The words struck harder than any weapon. The crowd went silent, stunned by the boldness of a human standing against the law of the city. Murmurs spread, sharp and restless. The merchants at the edge of the plaza whispered angrily to one another. Some looked afraid, others furious. The guard leader snarled, but before he could swing his staff, the girl stepped forward. Her body shook, but her glowing eyes burned brighter than before. For the first time in years, she lifted her chin high, no longer crouched or hiding. The markings on her skin faintly glowed in the sunlight, a shimmer of power that had long been buried. The crowd gasped again, whispers hissing like fire through dry leaves. Someone muttered. She looks like. Impossible, another hissed. That family is gone. The guards faltered, hesitation flashing across their faces. The girl's voice trembled, but she forced it out, louder than she thought possible. I am not your dog. I am not your property. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with tears. I was born royal. You cannot take that away. The silence was crushing. The crowd stared, the merchants stiff with fury. The guards shifted uneasily, their hands tight on their weapons, but their eyes uncertain. The human stood tall beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. His voice rang out again, strong and final. You heard her. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her will answer to me. The plaza boiled with noise. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief, a few even in awe. The guards snarled but did not strike. Too many eyes were watching now, too much attention drawn. They spat on the ground, retreating slowly, their pride wounded, but their fear stronger. The girl's knees almost gave out, but the human steadied her. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. She had never spoken like that before, never dared to claim her blood again. The fear still gnawed at her, but another feeling pushed through it. Strength. For the first time in years, she had stood tall. As the crowd began to break apart, merchants whispered angrily, planning their next move. They would not give up easily. The girl knew it. She could feel the storm still coming. But as she looked up at the human, her heart steadied. His presence was like a wall, and with him beside her, she could breathe. She whispered softly, so only he could hear. They will keep coming. His eyes stayed fixed on the retreating guards. Let them come. His voice was quiet but unshakable. We will face them together. Her throat tightened, tears burning her eyes again, but she blinked them away. She had cried too long, too often. Now, standing at his side, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Dignity. The plaza slowly emptied, but the story would spread. By nightfall, the entire city would know. The scrap eater was no beggar after all. She was something more. And a human had chosen to stand with her, no matter the cost. The marketplace was alive again, but the air was no longer the same. Whispers of the girl and the human spread through every street, carried on every tongue. The scrap eater stood tall. The cursed one spoke like royalty. The human protects her. Rumors swirled, growing larger with each retelling. Some said she was the last of a dead royal house. Others claimed the human was a madman or a fool. Whatever the truth, the story refused to die. The girl walked through the market beside the human, her steps slower, but no longer crawling. The blanket around her shoulders still clung like armor, but her head was higher now. She felt the stairs burning into her skin, yet she did not shrink the way she once had. Every time her fear tried to push her down, she remembered his words, "What are you now?" and forced her back straight. The merchants gathered in clusters, their faces sharp with anger. She could hear them hissing to one another. She should not walk here. She is dangerous. She must be silenced before the truth spreads further. Their voices made her stomach twist, but then she looked at the human's tall figure walking calmly beside her, and her fear thinned into something else. Defiance. At the center of the plaza, a crowd had formed, larger than before. People were waiting, expecting something. The girl's heart pounded as she realized they were waiting for her. The human stopped, his eyes scanning the gathering. The guards were there too, their staffs ready, their armor glinting. At their side stood a merchant leader, the same one who had sneered at her days before. His voice rang out over the crowd. There she is! The thief, the rat, the cursed blood. His hand pointed at her like a blade. She dares to walk as if she is more than filth. She dares to speak of royalty. Lies, all lies. The crowd stirred, some jeering, others quiet, their faces uncertain. The girl trembled, but the human's hand touched her shoulder lightly. His steady presence told her she was not alone. She breathed deeply, her small chest tight, then stepped forward. Her glowing eyes met the sea of faces. For the first time, she did not look away. Her voice shook, but carried through the silence. I am not cursed. I am not property. I am not nothing. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out stronger. I was born to a house that you destroyed. You call me a dog, but my blood is royal. You cannot take that from me. The plaza erupted in noise. Some shouted, some gasped, some laughed. The guards gripped their weapons, waiting for orders. The merchant leader raised his hands, his voice sharp. Lies! She is a fraud. She eats scraps like a beast. The human stepped forward, his tall frame blocking her from the guards. His voice boomed like thunder, silencing the chaos. You call her a beast because you fear her truth. You mock her because you know she is more than you. Look at her. Do you see a dog, or do you see a child who has survived everything you threw at her? The crowd fell still, their eyes shifting between the human and the girl. Whispers started again, but softer this time, uncertain. The girl's glowing eyes burned brighter, as though the fire inside her refused to stay hidden. She lifted her chin, her small body trembling but unbroken. You can laugh. You can call me filth, but I am still me, and I will not crawl anymore. The silence stretched heavy and long. Then, from the back of the crowd, a single voice called out. She looks like them, like the royal line. Others murmured in agreement. Her eyes, her markings, it's true. Doubt began to spread like cracks in stone. The merchant leader's face twisted with rage. He shouted, "She is nothing!" But his words no longer carried the same weight. Too many were whispering. Too many were questioning. The human placed his hand gently on her back, steadying her. His eyes swept the crowd, sharp and unyielding. She is not nothing. She is a princess, and she is under my protection. The words struck like a hammer. A hush spread, and for the first time, the people did not laugh. They did not mock. They stared at her with new eyes, some doubtful, some fearful, but many respectful. The merchant snarled, waving his arm. Guards, seize them both. The soldiers moved forward, but their steps were slower now, hesitation in their eyes. They had heard the whispers too. They had seen her glow. The girl stood straighter, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had nothing to fight with, no weapon, no strength. But she had her voice, and she shouted, her voice cracking the silence. I am not afraid of you anymore. The crowd gasped. The guards froze mid-step. The merchant's face paled as the tide shifted before his eyes. People began murmuring louder, some even pushing forward to see her better. The guards glanced at one another, uncertainty clear. None dared to be the first to strike. The human stepped forward once more, his voice final and sharp. If you touch her, you make an enemy of me. The weight of his words, the fire in her eyes, and the whispers of the crowd combined into something the merchants could not control. Slowly, the guards lowered their weapons. The merchant leader shouted in fury, but his voice was drowned by the noise of the people. The girl's chest rose and fell quickly. her body still trembling, but inside, something had broken free. She no longer felt like the scrap eater hiding by the bins. She no longer felt like a cursed shadow. She felt alive, standing in the light with the human beside her. The crowd parted as the human guided her away, his hands steady on her back. The people stared, but not with only scorn. Many now looked with awe, some even with quiet respect. As they left the plaza, her glowing eyes lifted to him. Her voice was soft, but filled with new strength. "You called me a princess." He looked down at her, calm and certain. "Because that's what you are." Her lips trembled, but this time it was not from fear. For the first time in years, a small, real smile spread across her face. She walked forward, not as a beggar, not as a thief, but as someone reborn. Someone who had been seen. Someone who had been defended. And though danger still waited in the shadows of the city, the world had changed. The little alien girl was no longer invisible. She was a princess once more.